My name is Margot, and at 32 years old, I had built a life that looked impressive from the outside. I ran a successful event planning business, the kind that handled flawless weddings, corporate galas, and holiday parties where nothing ever went wrong. I made chaos look effortless. I turned stress into schedules and problems into polished solutions. And every December, without fail, I did the same thing for my family's Christmas. This year was supposed to be special. I felt it in my chest weeks before December even arrived. For the first time in years, I wasn't just planning another holiday. I was looking forward to it. I had something of my own to bring into that house, someone of my own. That excitement lasted exactly until the afternoon I accidentally overheard the truth. I had stopped by my mother's house to drop off some decoration samples she wanted opinions on. The front door was unlocked, which wasn't unusual. As I stepped inside, voices drifted from the kitchen. My mother's voice, my sister's, my brother's. They didn't hear me. "And Margot can watch the kids," my sister said, casually, like she was assigning someone to refill drinks. "Yes," my mother agreed immediately. "She's so good with them, and she doesn't have children of her own anyway." My brother laughed. "Perfect. 5 kids, 1 Margot. She'll manage." They were planning Christmas, and they had already decided my role without asking me a single question. I stood frozen in the hallway, my keys digging into my palm. 5 children, an entire day. No conversation, no respect, just assumption. The betrayal didn't arrive loudly. It came quietly, settling into my chest like something heavy and cold. But instead of walking into that kitchen, instead of defending myself the way I had 100 times before, I turned around and walked out. I didn't confront them. I decided on something better. If you're watching this and your family has ever taken you for granted, hit subscribe, because this story isn't just about Christmas. It's about boundaries and what happens when the person everyone depends on finally steps back. Family is complicated. Mine certainly was. On the surface, we looked close-knit. Sunday dinners, birthday calls, holiday photos that made us look warm and loving. But beneath that picture-perfect image was a dynamic it took me years to understand. I was the middle child. My older sister, Abigail, was the golden standard. Organized, polished, married with twin boys, Jackson and James, 7-year-old whirlwinds she insisted were misunderstood angels. My younger brother, Thomas, had 3 children with his wife, Penny, 9-year-old Sophie, 5-year-old Emma, and 3-year-old Lucas, loud, messy, energetic children who turned every gathering into controlled chaos. And then there was me, single, reliable, always available. The daughter who never said no. My mother, Linda, had been widowed 5 years earlier when my father passed away from a sudden heart attack. He had been my quiet defender, the only one who noticed when my time was volunteered without permission. Without him, the balance shifted in ways I didn't recognize at first. After his death, my organizational skills became a family resource. At first, it felt natural, helping with Thanksgiving timing when my mother was overwhelmed, managing Easter plans, coordinating Christmas logistics. Slowly, without discussion, every gathering became my responsibility to plan, execute, and often pay for. I told myself it was temporary, that family helps family. Meanwhile, my business grew. I started small, birthday parties, baby showers, until I was handling corporate events and weddings that booked months in advance. My services commanded premium prices. My calendar was tight. My time mattered. My family forgot that part. They only remembered when they needed something. Last summer, Abigail called the day before her anniversary, panicked because her restaurant reservation had fallen through. Could I help? And while I was at it, could I watch the twins? I canceled my own plans, made 3 calls, pulled favors. By 9 that night, she and her husband were enjoying a private rooftop dinner I had arranged. I spent the night supervising 2 overtired boys who refused to sleep until midnight. 2 months ago, Thomas texted at 10 p.m., "Need dinosaur diorama by tomorrow morning. Any chance you could help?" I stayed up until 2 creating a prehistoric landscape that earned Sophie an A+. My mother depended on me most of all. Plumbing emergencies, technology issues, insurance paperwork, I handled it all without complaint. Until something changed. Last spring, I met Jason at a charity gala I was coordinating. He was the photographer, focused, calm, professional. Between his camera clicks and my clipboard checks, we started talking, and that conversation turned into something unexpected. Jason understood my schedule. He admired my skills instead of exploiting them. When I talked about my family, he didn't criticize, but he asked questions that lingered in my mind long after. "Do they ever ask you what you want?" he asked once. As Christmas approached, I felt hopeful. Jason and I had been dating for 8 months, and I wanted him there with me. I dropped hints at Thanksgiving. Nothing direct, just enough. They smiled, they nodded, and behind my back, they planned to use me again. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this Christmas would be different, and by the time it ended, they would never look at me the same way again. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, something inside me shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly. It was subtle, like the quiet moment before a decision fully settles in your bones. I stopped volunteering information. I stopped offering solutions before problems were even voiced. I listened more than I spoke, and I watched. My family continued exactly as they always had. Group messages filled with half-formed plans and vague expectations. Abigail sent a list of dishes she assumed I would coordinate. Thomas asked what time I wanted everyone to arrive, which really meant what time I planned to start managing the chaos. My mother forwarded decoration ideas and grocery suggestions, all framed as questions but never truly asking. Not once did anyone ask me if I was available. Not once did anyone mention Jason. That silence spoke volumes. Jason noticed the change immediately. "You're quieter," he said one evening as we sat on my couch, reviewing his upcoming photography schedule and my packed event calendar. "I'm thinking," I replied honestly. He didn't push. That was one of the things I appreciated most about him. He gave space without withdrawing support. Eventually, I told him everything: the overheard conversation, the assumptions, the years of unpaid emotional and logistical labor. He listened carefully, then said something that stayed with me. "You know, people don't stop taking when the supply is unlimited." That night, I made a decision, not out of anger, out of clarity. I decided I would not announce anything, no speeches, no confrontations. I would simply stop performing the role they had assigned me without consent. As Christmas approached, my family grew increasingly disorganized. Normally, by early December, I had already created a full schedule: meal prep timelines, gift exchanges, child supervision rotations. This year, there was nothing, and no one noticed until the cracks began to show. Abigail called first. "Hey, do you know what time we're eating?" "I'm not sure," I replied calmly. "No one's mentioned a plan yet." There was a pause, confusion, mild irritation. "Oh, okay, well, let me know." Thomas texted days later. "Do you need help with anything?" It was the first time he'd ever asked that question. "Thanks," I wrote back. "I'm covered," which was true. I was, because for the first time, I was planning something that had nothing to do with them. Jason and I quietly made our own arrangements, a small, elegant Christmas getaway just outside the city. No children, no noise, no expectations. Just peace, just choice. The name Margot represented a version of me my family understood, the dependable one, the invisible one. But as the days passed, I felt myself stepping into someone else, someone firmer, clearer, someone I began calling Claire, not publicly, not officially, but internally, a line drawn between who I had been and who I was becoming. Claire didn't rush to fix problems that weren't hers. Claire didn't apologize for being unavailable. Claire understood that love without respect is not generosity, it is depletion. 3 days before Christmas, my mother called, stress already creeping into her voice. "Sweetheart, what time are you coming on Christmas morning?" "I won't be," I said gently. Silence. "What do you mean?" "I have other plans this year." Another pause, longer this time. "Well, who's going to watch the kids?" "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I replied, calm and steady. Her disappointment was immediate. "But you always—" "I know," I said softly. "This year, I'm not." I hung up before she could argue. That night, guilt tried to creep in. Years of conditioning don't disappear overnight, but Jason's hand in mine grounded me. For the first time, I wasn't choosing avoidance, I was choosing myself. Christmas morning arrived quietly. No frantic calls, no early alarms, just sunlight, coffee, and a sense of relief I hadn't felt in years. By the time my phone started buzzing later that afternoon, I already knew. The system they built around my silence had collapsed, and for the first time, they were forced to see exactly how much I had been holding together. The first message came from Abigail. "Where are you?"
No greeting, no context, just expectation. I didn't reply. A few minutes later, my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, and another. When I finally checked the messages, they told the story clearly enough. Jackson and James were fighting. One had spilled juice on the couch. The other was crying because his gift wasn't the right color. Penny was overwhelmed. Thomas was irritated. My mother was flustered and exhausted. The machine I had quietly powered for years had stalled, and no one knew how to restart it. Jason watched me scroll through the notifications. "You don't have to answer," he said gently. "I know." And for the first time, I truly meant it. An hour later, my mother called again. This time, I answered. "Margot," she said, her voice tight, "we need you." There it was. Not an apology, not a question, a demand dressed as desperation. "I'm not available today," I said evenly. There was a sharp intake of breath. "This is Christmas. Family needs to be together." "I agree, and today I'm with the family I chose." She didn't respond immediately. When she did, her tone had shifted, less commanding, more wounded. "We didn't know you felt this way." I closed my eyes. "You never asked." The line went quiet. Then she said something that surprised me. "We assumed because you never complained." That doesn't mean I was okay. After we hung up, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. It wasn't joy. Revenge rarely is. It was clarity. Later that evening, Thomas sent a message, short, uncharacteristically honest. "We messed up. I didn't realize how much you handled until it fell apart." Abigail followed hours later. "I'm sorry, I took you for granted." They weren't grand apologies. They didn't erase years of imbalance, but they were real, and they only came because I had finally stopped compensating. That night, Jason and I walked through a quiet town square, Christmas lights reflecting off the snow. He squeezed my hand. "How do you feel?" I thought for a moment. "Free," I said, and a little sad, but mostly free. The name Claire no longer felt like a shield. It felt like a foundation. The next morning, my mother sent a message asking if we could talk after the holidays, not demanding, asking. That alone told me everything had changed. I didn't lose my family that Christmas. I found my place within it, and I learned something I wish I had understood years earlier. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you love less. It means you finally love yourself enough to stop disappearing. The conversation with my mother happened a week later, after the decorations were taken down and the emotional dust had settled. We met at her house, the same kitchen where I had overheard everything weeks earlier. This time, the air felt different, quieter, more careful. She didn't start with excuses. "I didn't realize how much we leaned on you," she said, folding her hands on the table. "Your father always protected you from that. When he was gone, I suppose we all filled the space without noticing." I listened, not defensively, not eagerly, just honestly. For a long time, I thought being needed was the same as being valued. Her eyes filled with tears. "I never meant to hurt you." "I know, but intention doesn't erase impact." That was the moment things truly shifted, not because everything was forgiven, but because everything was finally named. Abigail and Thomas changed too, slowly and imperfectly. Invitations began including real questions instead of assumptions. Responsibilities were shared instead of silently assigned. When plans were made, I was asked, not expected. And when I said no, the world didn't end. Jason remained steady through all of it. He never pushed me to cut ties, never demanded distance. He simply supported the version of me that no longer folded herself smaller for comfort. Months later, as spring approached, my business reached a new level. Bigger clients, better boundaries. I charged what my time was worth, and I lived like I believed it. Sometimes my phone still buzzed with family group messages. Sometimes I helped, sometimes I didn't. The difference was choice. The girl who once answered every call out of obligation had grown into a woman who responded with intention. Margot had been the role they understood. Claire was the woman I became. And the quiet truth is this: the revenge wasn't punishment, it was absence. It was letting people feel the weight of what they lost when they stopped respecting what I gave. Christmas didn't break my family, it revealed it. And it gave me something far more valuable than validation. It gave me myself. By the time the next Christmas approached, everything had subtly changed. My family had learned, slowly but surely, that my time, energy, and presence were not unlimited. They asked before assuming, they planned before delegating, and most importantly, they included me in the conversation, not just in the background, carrying the weight of every logistical detail. Abigail approached me with an unusual humility one evening, coffee in hand. Claire now, she said with a small smile. I wanted to say thank you for standing your ground last year. I think we finally understand how much you do for all of us. I studied her expression, genuine, tentative, a little awkward, but real. It wasn't about being thanked, I said softly. It was about being seen. Thomas chimed in, his eyes avoiding mine. I didn't realize how much I relied on you until I had to manage things myself. I owe you a lot. Hearing that, I felt a weight lift. Not pride, not satisfaction, but relief. They weren't groveling, they weren't begging for forgiveness. They were acknowledging the imbalance and attempting to correct it. And that, I realized, was more powerful than any dramatic revenge. Christmas morning arrived again, but this time the energy was different. The chaos was still there, the twins running, Sophie and Emma arguing over ornaments, Lucas refusing to put on his sweater, but I was not the only one solving problems. My family had stepped up. My mother, for the first time in years, asked for my input instead of issuing silent commands. Abigail and Thomas handled what they could manage, and when they faltered, they asked, not assumed. Jason watched me with a quiet smile. See, you didn't have to do it alone. I nodded. I know, and it feels amazing. That day, I realized that my revenge had never been about embarrassment or punishment. It had been about balance. It had been about reclaiming my agency, and now I could see the change reflected back at me. Not perfect, not immediate, but real. In the months following that Christmas, I began to notice subtle transformations in myself, too. Claire, the woman who had emerged from Margot's shadow, was more confident in business and personal life. I was no longer the automatic fixer for everyone around me. I started taking projects that challenged me creatively, even if it meant saying no to a family favor. I started setting boundaries for calls, messages, and even visits, and my relationships flourished because I no longer carried invisible guilt or obligation. One afternoon, I received a call from Abigail. Claire, I have a proposition. Can you help me plan my company's holiday party this year? I paused, smiling. Of course, but this time, let's agree on terms up front. We laughed. She understood. I didn't have to clarify why anymore. My family had learned the hard way that taking me for granted had consequences, and I had learned that standing firm didn't make me unkind, it made me whole. Christmas that year, Jason and I hosted a small gathering of our own, inviting friends, distant relatives, and a few neighbors. No expectations, no chaos, just joy. And when my family joined later, they were welcomed, not entitled. They didn't demand my time, they respected it. That was the ultimate victory. Not embarrassment, not chaos inflicted on them, but the quiet, undeniable fact that I had finally chosen myself, without guilt, and that they had adapted. For the first time, I felt completely free. By the time the next Christmas rolled around, everything had shifted in ways I hadn't imagined possible. My family had learned boundaries, respect, and the value of asking instead of assuming. I had learned to say no without guilt, to prioritize my own needs without fear, and to embrace a version of myself I never knew I could be. Christmas morning began differently this year. I woke to the sound of laughter. Jason and I had chosen to stay home for a quiet start, decorating our small tree, making cocoa, and exchanging gifts, just the two of us. The joy was intimate, without pressure, without expectation. I realized how rare and precious it was to enjoy the holiday on my own terms. Later, my family arrived. There was no frantic calling ahead, no last-minute panic. They entered with smiles and warmth, but they carried responsibility with them. Abigail handled the twins, keeping them entertained without relying on me. Thomas coordinated activities for his children, and my mother, she smiled quietly, setting the table and letting me guide if I chose to. I felt a surge of pride, not the pride of control, but the pride of seeing growth. They had learned, they had adapted, and the holiday was richer for it. At one point, Abigail whispered to me, "I know we've made mistakes. I just want you to know I'm proud of you, Claire. Not for what you do, but for who you are." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you," I said softly. "That means more than anything." Jason squeezed my hand. "You did this," he said. "You set the rules, and they finally listened." I smiled, feeling the weight of years lift. Margot, the ever-reliable daughter who vanished behind duty, had transformed into Claire, the woman who stood firm, who balanced love with boundaries, and who finally lived for herself without apology. That night, as the children settled and the lights twinkled, I reflected on what had truly changed. My revenge had not been loud, dramatic, or cruel. It had been quiet. It had been absence, choice, and assertion. By stepping back, I gave my family the chance to see the value of my presence, and they responded, not perfectly, but meaningfully. Christmas wasn't about perfection or control. It was about respect, recognition, and mutual care. And I had finally taught, without yelling or confrontation, that love should never require self-erasure. As I watched Jason laugh with Jackson and James, Sophie and Emma racing around the tree, and Lucas stacking ornaments with care, I realized something important. The greatest revenge is not in humiliation. The greatest revenge is reclaiming yourself, and in doing so, inspiring change in those around you. That night, my phone buzzed with messages of gratitude, acknowledgement, and love from family members I hadn't heard so clearly in years. I smiled. For the first time, the holidays felt like a celebration of family, not a duty I carried alone. I sipped my cocoa, holding Jason's hand, and whispered to myself, "This is what it feels like to be seen. This is what it feels like to be free. This is what it feels like to finally choose yourself."